overcoming poverty, burning off stress, paying attention with ADHD, building a career, beating a painful genetic disorder. After 13 years of helping others do the same, fitness became a foundation for my life's greatest gift and challenge, becoming a father. My name's Alex Van Houten, and I believe that what I eat, how I move, and what habits I live by are the rock upon which I build my physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being. And whatever I do will rub off on my kids and my community. Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where we work to untangle the messy knots of the health and fitness industry as if your children's lives depended on it. Because they do. This is where we decide to make our bodies stand for something bigger than ourselves. This is where we find practical wisdom to live by, one powerful conversation at a time. May the words spoken here inspire you to keep moving forward no matter where you are. Who knows who you could be if you could become 1% better every single day.
We can do the show thanks to the support of listeners just like you. For more information how you can become part of the inner circle, go to findingdadbod.com/inner circle. That's findingdadbod.com/inner circle.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. Today's show is an awesome show because I'm in preparation for an awesome debate with Lane Norton about the role of calories in our health and fitness and body composition goals. And in preparation for that discussion, I wanted to bring on our favorite nutrition sciences PhD, Dr. Adrian Chavez, so that he and I could talk through some of the nuances in caloric tracking and how he's using calories in his nutrition coaching practice. There's so many good nuggets in this conversation, I can't wait for you to hear it. I will say that we experienced some technical difficulties, and there's a couple spots in this interview where the sound gets choppy. Our editor made a valiant effort to make it a little more listenable than it was originally. But if the end product leaves you with some questions, please reach out. I'd be happy to help. And this is your final opportunity to register for our Hormone Mastermind going down the first week of August, with our hormone series being the top episodes of Defining Dad Bod as we went through in episode 100, and many listeners of the show asking, if calories are such a wash, where should I start with my nutrition and lifestyle instead? This Hormone Mastermind is going to be powerful. We've got a great group forming, and I hope you'll consider jumping in with us. Registration ends July 31st, and we'll launch our mastermind the first week of August. The link's in the description below, or you can go to definingdadbod.com/shop/hormone mastermind. A couple frequently asked questions. 1. What kind of call will we be doing for the mastermind? Great question. We'll be on Zoom. It's a free app. You can download it on your smartphone or use it through your web browser. All you need is a strong internet connection or some good reception, and you'll do just fine. No video is not required. However, it's encouraged to have your camera on because online interactions feel a lot more in person when you can actually see the person you're talking to. Another question is, what time will the mastermind be? Well, since this is our first one, you can actually be helpful in choosing that time. When you go to definingdadbod.com/shop and click Hormone Mastermind, purchasing the product will actually require you to fill out a form, and you can vote for the time you'd prefer. The most popular time wins. And the last question, what if the time doesn't work for me? Well, that bites. I'm sorry. And maybe in the future we'll be able to offer multiple slots. But if you purchase the Hormone Mastermind and the time does not work for you, you will receive a recorded copy of the session, both audio and video. So when you do get an opportunity, you can listen, watch, take notes, and if it leaves you with questions, you're welcome to submit those through the Defining Dad Bod Inner Circle. I'm excited to get your insulin, cortisol, testosterone, and thyroid hormone systems working with you rather than against you. Go to definingdadbod.com/shop/hormone mastermind. And now let's talk to Dr. Adrian Chavez about how we can get the most out of our nutrition practices.
super excited to hang out today with Dr. Adrian Chavez. Dr. Chavez, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited about this conversation because we're going to dive into quite a few things that are going to give some clarity around not just our coaching practices, but also around the misconceptions or maybe misunderstandings out there about how we use calories to enhance our health and fitness, and also to manage our weight, our body composition, maybe even muscle gain. So it's an awesome topic. I really appreciate you getting on here and talking honestly with me about some of this stuff. So first, I wanted to give the listeners just a quick recap of some of the things we've done together. And if you'll look back through the Defining Dad Bod stuff, Dr. Adrian Chavez was nice enough to jump on to the Defining Dad Bod show before we were even that popular. So thanks, man. I appreciate that. And our first conversation was about you becoming your most important advocate with regard to your medical health. In fact, I believe you called it being your most important physician, I believe was your mindset around that.
Yeah, I like the term, like, be your own best doctor. I think that's just
there
so
you go.
important.
Yeah,
be your own best doctor.
Exactly. And it was awesome. We got to talk through blood panel metrics and whatnot. If you haven't gotten to hear that conversation, go check it out. It was powerful. And then I was actually just telling Dr. Chavez in our first 100 episodes of Defining Dad Bod, he has the coveted number 4 most popular spot as the guy who got on here and talked about, should you go keto? And I don't want to spoil that conversation for you. We'll just leave it at that and go check out that conversation. I thought it was powerful, and I know that we set a lot of the records straight together. So thanks, first and foremost, thanks for jumping on here and lending your knowledge as always. What are you up to right now? Because you got your Nutrition Perscription, the podcast that you're running. What are you, like 150, 200, 250 episodes? I can't keep up. You put out so much content. Over
250 at this point.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I haven't put out an episode in about 3 months, though. I'm actually launching it back up this week.
Oh, cool.
I was putting out 5 episodes a week, and yeah, that was great. and it was fun, and I enjoy it. I love getting on podcasts and talking. I think that's my favorite medium of, like, how to educate and put out content. But you know, I got into a new relationship, a couple of kids in the mix. My girlfriend has a couple of kids. I was a single dad. And I had to cut some things back, and the podcast was one of those things that had to go at that point. And I reduced the frequency of the content, and then I put it on pause, and I always intended to go back to it. But I wanted to make sure that I went back to it intentionally, had a good strategy, rather than just kind of trying to put out episodes as I could.
Churning out stuff, yeah.
Which is kind of what I ended up doing with, running business and trying to dedicate time to a relationship and that type of thing. So that has been going good. The podcast, I'm really looking forward. I'll be probably publishing a new episode next Monday, first one in a few months. And but aside from that, still running Dad's Based Fitness program. So I run a program with one of my good friends, Chris Hughes, called the Driven Dad 8-week health and fitness boot camp. We're making some adjustments to that right now, actually, as well. We want to make that more of an ongoing thing. We've been running 8-week boot camps for about a year and a half. We worked with over 100 men at this point, and we want to transition that over to something that's more continuous, because we get guys in the 8 weeks, and a lot of them get results beyond the 8 weeks. But one of the things that we find that people need ongoing is accountability. And that lack of accountability beyond the 8 weeks is kind of where I feel like we were lacking. So we're trying to put together a better model where we can provide an ongoing type program where, you come in, you get 8 weeks of more rigorous training and nutrition programming, and then we help provide ongoing accountability. So we're working on some adjustments to that program. We'll probably rename it in the near future, but we haven't really come to a conclusion about what we're going to do there as well. I work one-on-one with clients. Intended to get into this. I had a couple of clients early on that had some digestive issues. I'm a nerd. As you'll hear, I have a PhD in nutrition. I will dive into the science. If I want to learn something, I will spend hours and hours and hours reading research papers and reading books. And so I had a couple of clients who came to me with, trying to lose weight, hormone issues. I realized they had some serious digestive issues. Read a bunch of books, read a bunch of papers, and have been able to get really good results with people dealing with IBS, with Crohn's, colitis, that type of thing. So really more serious digestive issues. So I've transitioned most of my one-on-one practice there, because I see that those are the clients that I can really impact, like 3 to 6 months I can transform their entire life, where they went from, pain every day and discomfort and crazy, fear around eating foods and not being able to, live life without knowing where the nearest restroom is, to getting their life back. So I've really focused my one-on-one practice there, and it's just so interesting. Like that's like a frontier right now of health, and many of these people are getting sold all sorts of different types of gimmicks and supplements and that type of thing. So I really want to try to be at the forefront of providing evidence-based strategies and tools and programs to help people overcome those issues and get their health back. So that's what I do one-on-one wise. The other thing that I do, so I've talked to you about this before, Alex. I launched a course about 4 years ago to help train personal trainers, to help get them certified. So teach them some of the foundational principles of personal training. I've also, over the last year, started to incorporate a nutrition certification as well. So I launched that earlier this year. I've gone through one round of trainers who have gone through my course, and now I'm trying to build that up as well. And that's just really teaching the foundations. Personal trainers, they should know it, and they should be helping their clients with these things. So, and many personal trainers just don't know the nutrition aspect of it. And it really does come down to, you just need to know the basics. You're not a dietitian. You can refer out when necessary, but the point of this course is to really help these personal trainers nail down the basics to help provide more value for their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, you got so much stuff going on. No wonder you had to put the podcast on hold. That doesn't change the fact that you have 250 plus awesome episodes to go check out, which I'd encourage people, Your Nutrition Prescription, go check that out. I particularly enjoyed all of the ones having to do with apple cider vinegar, since people seem to be drinking a lot of that. And I thought it was great how you brought the research forward and talked about the cases that it might be helpful, and they were few and far between, and some of the cases where it was like, stop it, what are you doing? Don't do this. Please don't do this. So and anyway, you've got a lot going on, man, and I appreciate you taking the time to jump on here. You actually hit an important nerve that leads us right into our conversation today, which is personal trainers and their knowledge or lack thereof around nutrition. And I'm not knocking trainers, because I've been in the training industry for just over, well, we're going on 14 years. I'm getting older every day. Yes, kinda. Just over 14 years. And I remember when I first started training certification, like to become a certified personal trainer, your amount of education around nutrition is quite minuscule. And even then, at the time that personal training was becoming a thing, and so, 14 years ago when I first got certified, the majority of people who would hire personal trainers were interested in kind of the bodybuilding and physique competition atmosphere. And so the idea of nutrition change really came down to, am I growing muscle? Then I need to have a calorie surplus. Or am I cutting fat? Then I need to have a calorie deficit. And so the trainers were speaking this language. The food industry was speaking this language. A lot of people were speaking the language around calories. And now you and I are going to talk today about some of the more nuanced pieces of the calorie equation, and at what point in coaching is that maybe not just necessary, but even appropriate to bring into the conversation to ask the client, and whether or not that's going to result in the best results for that person and continued sustained maintainable results for that person. And so let's dive into that first. I mean, as my listeners have heard in my Beyond Calorie series part 1 and 2, they know that I come from the position of believing that there are quite a few more things with regard to our food that are worth paying attention to before we get really ninja with our caloric intake. But before we talk about those things specific, let's talk about the equation itself. You and I, prior to the show, were talking about how nuanced some of this stuff is when we start working to create a caloric deficit to lose fat, and then perhaps when we start trying to exercise in order to further that caloric deficit. So the calorie equation is not that simple. There's some compensations that happen in the body, and as I understand it, especially with your background in digestion, there's some stuff going on in the digestive system that really changes things as well. Can you tell us a little bit about those nuances?
Yeah, first off, I love that bathtub analogy. And you were saying that, I was thinking like, well, it maybe is like a bathtub that has like a leak, and then there's a kid in there playing,
Yes.
splashing water all over the place, and then the rain is leaking as well, you can look at it that way. And at the end of the day, it is important. And I think in some cases, that's a piece that needs to be put in as a tool at some point in someone's journey, that understanding. But like you said, there are many variables that come into play, and this where the kid splashing water in the bathtub and the drain leaking and not being able to shut it off. Like, there's just so many factors that you have to consider. One of those factors is the microbiome, and that's the bugs in our gut. We have 100 trillion bugs in our gut that comprise our microbiome. Our microbiome extends beyond our gut. That's one thing that a lot of people really don't understand. Basically, every lining in our body is covered in bacteria, yeast, parasites, and that 100 trillion bugs that basically live in a symbiotic relationship with us, should be symbiotic. It's not always symbiotic, but that live in a symbiotic relationship with us, affect the way that we extract calories from food. There was a series of papers published, and I read about these when I was doing my PhD about 7-8 years ago, where they took the microbiome, and you can't really do this in humans, but they actually took microbiome from rats, and they extracted the microbiome. Basically, they did a stool transplant from lean rats to obese rats, and what they found was those obese rats got lean. And then the other way around, when they took the stool samples and did the stool transplant from the obese rats and put it in a lean rat, the other way around happened. The lean rats got obese.
And importantly, they kept the food intake the same. If I'm reading the same studies you are, in that the food intake of both rats were the same. The only thing that changed was that they switched the microbiome in the rats, so that lean rats got obese eating the same food, but having the obese rat's bacteria, and then vice versa, right?
Exactly. So in this case, you see how much of a profound effect that could have. Like, when I first read those studies, I was like, this doesn't even make sense. Like,
yeah, wait, what?
Just like threw me off completely. I'm like, everything I thought I knew about calories and weight loss and that type of thing is just completely thrown out the window here. Now, in a human, I think the variation is probably a little bit, it's not as dramatic. These rats are basically bred to get really, really obese. And then the other rats, they call them the normal type rats or whatever. They're not. So, in humans, I think the variation is a little bit less, but it's still, it makes a difference. It's one of the many factors that does make a difference. So, for some people, they could be counting calories and trying to stick to this equation, and they're doing it over and over again. I'm doing it perfectly, and I'm counting and I'm exercising, and I'm really dialing in on this equation, but they're extracting more calories from their food. One of the other things, and this is completely not physiological, is that when you look at nutrition labels, they're actually allowed to be 20% off. I'm not sure if you've talked about this before, Alex, but so if you get a 100-calorie snack pack, it can actually be 118 calories. So if you think you're eating 1,000 calories, you could be eating 1,200.
Right.
So if you're shooting for 2,000 per day, you could be closer to 2,400. That's 400 calories a day that you're completely off based on these nutrition labels.
Right, which doesn't sound like a big deal until you extrapolate that over like 4 or 5 months. If you're trying to create a deficit, maybe you don't have a deficit at all with that kind of error.
Yeah.
And then it could be that you're actually, that accounts for the average weight gain for the average person year over year.
Oh, it accounts for much more than the average weight gain per person.
Right.
The average weight gain is about 2 pounds per year. It's like 20 calories or something like that. So,
oh, thanks for that. That was a good number.
The number, the amount of calories, and that's why I say it's a tool, because the understanding of, looking at, like, for example, I've been doing this a lot with my girlfriend. She really doesn't understand this. Like, she'll go and snack on pecans or something like that. And I'm like, well, you really, there's value in understanding that if you just sit there and snack on pecans, you're probably going to eat 500 calories, and you probably would have been better off eating a meal.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a serving size of pecans and like 3 handfuls. Yeah. And you don't even realize how fast you can throw down that many calories from fat in a nut like that, even though it's a great snack. Oh,
nuts are amazing. All types of nuts. The cardiovascular benefits, the cancer-based benefits, the metabolic benefits. Like, every study we've ever looked at that shows, studies nut consumption, it's positive. It's going to have a positive health effect. But we also have to consider, and I'm sure your listeners know this, we have to consider metabolic overload.
Absolutely.
Like, if you're eating too much and your calories are too high and you're just going over every day and you're overweight and you're gaining weight, that has a negative health effect no matter how healthy your food is. So that's where, there's nuances there where, yes, it's very important. But it's not everything. And we have to look at these other factors as well.
So can you talk a little bit about, we were talking about this pre-show, can you talk a little bit about some of the research and then maybe even some of your personal experience around how when people work hard to create a deficit through exercise, like I'm going to burn these calories, or I had cake last night, so I'm going to go for a longer run today, or whatever. You talked about the kids splashing in the bathtub, kind of adding to my analogy, which I appreciate. I might actually steal that back, where it kind of messes with the equation. It's not just some problems with calories in that can become difficult from a calculation perspective, but also there are some nuances in how people respond to exercise, where the kid splashing in the bathtub might actually change the way some of the water coming out of the bathtub is measured as well. Could you talk a little bit about those compensatory changes?
Yeah. So, it's actually really interesting. Also blew my mind. I was working on my PhD. There was some researchers in my department that they were studying the individual variation in weight loss in response to exercise training. So they were bringing women in and they were having them exercise 5 times a week for 45 minutes a day. And what they were showing, and the primary purpose of their studies, was to show individual variation. Some of these women lost a decent amount of weight over the course of a year. Others actually gained weight exercising 5 times a week for 45 minutes. And so they're all doing the same amount of exercise. They did nutrition stable, but for some people, they're going to have a biological drive to eat more. So when you exercise, you're going to have a biological drive to eat more. You may not realize that you're eating a little bit more, but that's just one of the things that happens. Another thing, and this is probably the thing that research shows might be the most important, is down regulation of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this term, you might hear it called NEAT, NEAT, and that is basically the amount of movement that you get outside of exercise. So you're exercising for 45 minutes. You have 23 hours and 15 minutes throughout the rest of the day where you're expending energy. And the amount of energy that you expend during that period is largely dependent on subconscious factors. Like when you exercise, some people downregulate their NEAT dramatically, 300 to 400 calories. So they got 400 calories of expenditure during their exercise training session, but then they did a little bit less fidgeting. They went to the bathroom less. They, rolled around in bed less. They maybe, had less of a desire to cook or clean or whatever the case may be. That can completely account for what you burned from exercise. Like that 400 calories is completely wiped out because of that downregulation in non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Another factor, and this kind of goes into, it's again, not physiological, people overestimate dramatically the amount of calories that they burn from an exercise training session. Like every time I see someone post how many calories they burn from exercise training, I'm like, no,
there's no way.
Like, if you really were hooked up to a metabolic cart and you got an accurate estimate of your energy expenditure, that's not it. And like I've just been in research labs and seen the actual output for years of what energy expenditure looks like and how much expenditure you'll get from certain activities. And people are just off. And one of the things that I saw this weekend, Orange Theory, like it's a great training program, but I feel like they must just be changing their calculations to make people believe that they burn more calories. Because when I see people come out of those classes and they're saying they burned 1,000 calories, 800 calories, I'm like, that you burned 1,000 calories from running 10 miles. Like, did your expenditure equal what running 10 miles would have done to your body? It did not. That's really, really difficult to burn 1,000 calories in an hour. And I see that all the time. I saw that this weekend, and that's why it came to my mind. I saw someone say, oh, I burned 850 calories at Orange Theory. And I'm like, I don't want to accuse them of anything, but sure. I'm like, they must be tweaking equations or something on the output that they're getting.
It's got to be like a little like coefficient they're adding. Like, hey, you did this much times, like 1.8. I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
it should be like 1.6. Or they're estimating based on 100% lean body mass or something along those lines. Like, I'm not sure, but
This is actually kind of a fun rabbit trail, and I don't want to follow it too terribly long for listeners here, but I work with quite a few people who are using metabolic analysis with a portable metabolic analyzer. And one of the coaches that I'm currently mentoring at the moment, he actually works with a lot of the Orange Theory fitnesses across the Eastern Seaboard. And so he's going in and actually doing metabolic testing. And he was telling me that he was like, am I doing this wrong? Because the difference between what my unit is different thing. But people don't know that. It's not common knowledge in most people's mind when it comes to exercise. If you and I were running on the treadmill beside each other, and I don't know your metrics, I'm going to make this up. If you're 180 pounds and I'm 180 pounds and we're the same age and we're male and we're running beside each other at the same speed, not only is there variation between how many calories we actually burn. Maybe I'm a more efficient runner. Maybe you're a more efficient runner, depending on how much you bounce or how much your arms swing and stuff. But in addition to that, you might have had a much more stressful few weeks, which requires your body to burn through a lot more energy to make this happen for you. And maybe I slept great and I'm well recovered and this is not a big deal. So my body's like cruising in cruise control. We could do the exact same exercise. Our treadmills would tell us that we burned the same amount of calories, but the variation could be almost depending on the person, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, lean body mass. And then the other thing is all these equations are estimating based on heart rate. And I mean, my heart rate at rest is 35. Like these equations are going to be off for me, as opposed to, let's say, someone else. And I think that's one of the things that these Orange Theory classes do as well, is they're going to keep your heart rate even higher because they're playing the type of music that, like, if you're listening to classical music or a podcast, your heart rate's going to be a little bit lower during exercise as opposed to something that's really upbeat and that's going to cause a physiological response. It's going to increase your heart rate a little bit, and that's not necessarily going to translate to increased energy expenditure. So, I think, from the energy expenditure perspective, that's one of the biggest things that I see is just people trying to manage this equation of flawed numbers. And that's one of the areas where I think from a non-physiological perspective, wipe out all the physiological variation. Like they're just using the wrong numbers. They're using really poor estimates of calories. Are you measuring? Are you weighing things? Are you... do you really know everything that was put into your restaurant meal? That's what makes it really, really difficult. And that's where, I think you and I both, like, for me, it depends on who I'm working with and where they're at, whether or not I'm going to focus on calories or focus on the energy balance equation. I do want everybody that I work with to understand it at some point, but where that point comes in is going to be, I want them to have foundational factors in place first.
Very well said.
If someone's eating horribly, I won't even mention calories. And like if they're eating fast food and chips, and there's no reason to mention it at that point. Okay, let's just get you a couple cups of veggies in. Let's make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Let's make sure you're eating whole foods. And you're going to get great results just from that. And maybe you don't even need to take it beyond that. Maybe you can reach all of your goals just by eating wisely, for that period of time.
That's so well said. Oftentimes on the show, I say, 100 calories of Skittles and 100 calories of spinach are the same calories. And we obviously know one of them is better for us than the other. And there's a number of reasons why that might be. And we could talk about that if you care to. But when you're on the Skittles, Twinkies, soda, pizza diet, we've got to help you get to the real food diet, and then maybe we could talk about energy expenditure and whatnot. But if I look at you and I say, all right, man, you're eating like 3,000 calories a day of junk food. What I need you to do is eat 2,700 calories a day, and you could keep eating your junk food. Then you and I both know maybe a deficit will get you some positive weight loss results for a brief period of time, but that doesn't fix the underlying issue, which is, one, you're feeding your body garbage. It's hard to build a good house out of cruddy bricks, right? And then two, metabolically speaking, if you create a deficit in a body that isn't functioning in a way to support lean body mass, then all it's going to do is lower your metabolic rate to meet your intake. And then you're going to either plateau and then eat more and gain your weight back, or you're going to have to manage your calories like a boss for the next, 30 years of your life, which I don't know about you, but it doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah. In the programs that I run, we do base our recommendations on calories, but we also emphasize food quality. And a lot of times, what I'll tell them is, I don't want you to do this forever. I know how to do this mentally now. I know if I overeat, I know if I underate, and on the days if I overeat a couple of days, I will undereat a couple of days. I will balance that out, and I don't need to count. Now, if I wanted to get into a physique competition or something like that, or get under 10% body fat, then I probably would. But for the average person, that's not even healthy. First of all, there's no data to show that 1% body fat to a lot of be 8.5 to really not enjoy your life. If you're 8% body fat, you're probably going to lower your testosterone levels because you're creating a state of scarcity where your metabolic rate's going to go down, your hormone levels are going to go down, and you have to constantly restrict. There's no point in that. There's no benefit from a health perspective. Now, if you want to do it for aesthetic purposes, I get it, but most women don't even like that anyway. My girlfriend's you're getting too lean, you need to eat more.
Right.
All the time. And I mean, I've seen that over and over again. Previous relationships too. It's once I get to 10%, they're like, "Oh, you need to eat more." I'm
yeah.
I thought this was desirable.
I want to say it because it's something that I've dealt with a lot. I've actually helped quite a few bodybuilders, physique competitors, even figure competitors on the female side especially, who have just wrecked their hormones to achieve body compositions on stage. And what you see is the picture. You see you got the bikini picture that's, that, I don't know, you can show your kids someday. Have you seen that meme? This is a side note too, but have you seen that meme where it's pictures of my grandma and then pictures of grandparents 50 years from now, and it's like grandma, she looks all regal and conservatism was birthed from her womb, it's black and white, it's all good. And then you've got your grandma on Instagram with a booty shot in the bathroom, so anyway, the people see that change and they're like, oh, I want to have him, or I talked about 6 pounds time that body composition change that you see in a competitor. When you actually go on the other side of things, there's a dark side of that. And I've, tested these people, and I've seen, HDL cholesterol of 12. This guy's 250 pounds, probably solid muscle, right? Just amazing physique. HDL 12. HDL protects your heart. It's a heart protective cardiovascular. It's one of the very few metrics that if you had good high HDL, it's a negative risk factor for heart disease, which is good. I want you to live a long time, but also our cholesterol is the building blocks for all of our hormones. And this guy with an HDL 12, you're looking at him, you're like, man, what a mountain of a man. And he had just taken second in his IFBB Pro competition. His testosterone, his free testosterone, was in its 30s.
Wow.
He had the testosterone of somebody who should be 70 years old, right? And his doctor was recommending testosterone replacement therapy. He's like, how did I get here? I look like a man in the mirror. What's going on with me? I'm like, you can't eat 20% of your calories from fat at an 800 calorie deficit for 6 months without ruining your hormones. It's just not going to happen that way. So something important that you said there just struck a chord with me, and it's that from a nutrition perspective, there is a difference between training for a bodybuilding physique or bikini competition to look good on stage. There's a difference between training for that and training in a way where you achieve a certain level of lean body mass, maybe a certain level of fat mass and whatnot, but you're interested in that being a consistent thing. I mean, if you don't have enough testosterone to take your wife to bed frequently and happily, then is that a problem for you? Because you might want to think about that before you start trying to cut to 6% body fat, and because that will affect a lot of hormones downstream, And so anyway, thanks for striking that chord. I'll get off my soapbox and let you talk for a second.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people just don't understand is we're not necessarily to be 0% body fat. Your mind changes, during Christmas time. That's probably when I get the where I hit like my highest levels of body fat percentage. But even then it's, couple, maybe 10-pound difference from the leanest that I am throughout the year. For me, it's like a checks and balances thing. Like I might gain a little bit of weight, but what I do is, like, once I see that I'm inching upwards, I will go aggressive calorie deficit for about 2 to 3 weeks. And I will pretty much eat 2 meals a day and eat like 12 to 1500 calories for a couple of weeks and then go back to maintenance. Because I found that for me, it's motivating to get quick results. That's one of the reasons that I like it as well. Like, after a week, I'm down like 8 pounds,
There you go.
It's easier for me to do, like, I'm just a sprint type of guy. So it's easier for me to just go 3 weeks and then go back to maintenance and go back to living a normal life than, diet for 3 months to get that same result. And that's just one of the things that I feel is a psychological component that we have to look at with clients is like, what are you going to be better off doing? 3 weeks of aggressiveness or 6 weeks of more moderate calorie restriction. And you have to understand that if you are going to do 3 weeks of aggressive dieting, you're going to probably feel a little bit less energetic. You're not going to perform as well at the gym. There's going to be some issues, but 6 weeks of, dieting is also going to cause some of those same side effects, just on a more prolonged level, not as extreme.
A little less acute. Yeah. From a coaching perspective, I think of that in two ways. I think one, I look at you, and you guys can't see him because you're not in the video, but you're obviously a healthy dude. Like, you don't have bags under your eyes. You're not overweight in the face and stuff. You're somebody who foundationally is a conditioned individual. You exercise regularly. You eat pretty well almost all of the time, right? So if you do something aggressive for yourself for 2 to 3 weeks, you're not going to have a lot of negative repercussions. Where for my part, from a coaching perspective, I'm working with somebody and they're like, I want the best results I can get in the shortest amount of time. I'm like, look, you haven't eaten well for like 8 years. You've barely exercised, right? If you jump on this bandwagon really hard for 3 weeks, all we're going to do is tear you down. Like, you might lose some weight, you might lose some fat, your pants might start fitting better and stuff. But what's going to happen is we're going to eat up all your hormonal reserves, so that in the long run, this is, one, not sustainable, and two, your body's homeostasis is not going to shift to a positive direction. If you are in generally good health and you are generally well conditioned, hitting a caloric deficit for a short period of time, in my opinion, and I think the research bears this out in the NEAT perspective, it seems that you have way less compensation on the front end of things, way less of a yo-yo effect. Whereas if we're talking about, like, this is kind of a first step for you, you're pretty deconditioned, you haven't been eating well, you know it, and you want to make a change. I am the slow and steady wins the race coach in this perspective. And I want you to make the changes that are going to show you the biggest results that are sustainable. And that's what we want to see when I'm working with somebody. I'll straight up tell them, is it important to you that 3 weeks from now you look your best, but a year from now you look the same? Or is it important to you that 1 year from now we've changed completely and it's not really hard to maintain that change? Like, which one of those are we going for? Because we can do either, but they're two different paths to walk for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And, with that being said about the, everything else that's going on in life, overall health, I think, and I explain this with a lot of my clients, let's consider, like, we can fill up that cup with stress, and all stressors go into that. If you have a hard job, if you're lacking sleep, if you have a new baby, if your relationship is struggling, if you have financial troubles, like, all of those are going to add stress into that cup. And once that cup starts overflowing, that's when things get out of hand. So if you have a lot of room in that cup, which, as you mentioned, like I typically do because I take very good care of myself on a regular basis, I can go really aggressive. If you don't, you can't do that. And that's a really good point, is because, dieting for a long period of time aggressively is going to fill that cup up. And especially if you're lacking sleep, relationships, job, all these other factors that are adding into that cup. And you really want to be mindful of, where are you as far as like overall stress? I think a lot of people will, consider their physical stress in a different in a different way that they consider their emotional and mental stress. And it really all contributes to a physiological response.
Yeah.
And when we overload our bodies, that can lead to what you're referring to is like just metabolic derangement, where it's really difficult to get back. It really makes it difficult to balance lose weight and really stay healthy, because you kind of crashed yourself at that point. And then you have to really get back to foundation of like emptying out that cup. And I work with some clients who I say, I want you to not exercise. Actually, like you're going to be doing yoga and walking.
Right. Yeah.
And I want you to focus on sleep. I want you to not count any calories and just focus on eating nutritionally. Because sometimes I'll have people come to me with hormonal issues, mostly female women who were runners, who counted calories, who had a bunch of babies, who had relationship stress, who had life stress, like raising kids and that type of thing. And it just adds up and leads to just a crash. And they'll come to me, having no idea what to do. They've seen many doctors. They're really fatigued. They can't get up in the morning with like energy. They can't fall asleep at night. Like they can't stay asleep. And that's the end product of trying to push too hard.
Yeah.
And you definitely want to take that into consideration.
Dude, your analogy, that's just sexy. I love that. You have a stress cup, all right? And you have as much stress as you can hold in that cup. And maybe I'm not going to title the interview this, but it could be a calorie is not necessarily a calorie, but all stress is definitely stress. and your exercise change and your nutrition change, those add to that stress cup. And the one thing I would like people to know is that through training well, through intelligent training and through intelligent nutrition changes, you can grow your cup, but it's not very easy. There are some people, if you look around, you're like, Alex and Adrian, they're eating well, they're exercising regularly, they have kids, they're sleeping well. Like why do they have it together? And I'm not saying that I handle stress better than everybody else or whatnot, but if you work with clients and you can train them in such a way that it seems like they gain the capacity to handle some more stress, but you do that like one drop at a time. Like the cup doesn't get bigger by the gallon, all right? Like maybe an ounce or two, and it takes time to grow that.
In growing that, you have to consider like with proper training, you can grow it, but then proper training also adds to the cup a little bit. So
you got it.
You have to balance that out. When you were saying, like before that was actually in my head. So I forgot to mention grow the cup.
Nice. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength.
Definitely, man. And from a nutrition perspective, I think a lot of that comes down to just nutrient adequacy.
Yes.
Making sure you have vitamin D, making sure you have vitamins, your minerals. Like if you're lacking in nutrients, if you have low B5, low B12, low vitamin D, low vitamin A, your immune system's not going to work properly. Your energy systems are not going to work properly. And if you're lacking these things, that can shrink your cup. The amount of stress that you can you can experience and handle is going to be limited if you're nutritionally deficient. So that's where, a high quality diet's great. That's where I typically just recommend a multivitamin, just to make sure that we cover all those bases.
Right.
Because even with a high quality, well structured nutrition plan, unless you're like eating liver,
that's great. Unless you're like eating liver.
I've looked at a lot of diets. I really have not met anyone who just eats liver on a regular basis, and that's going to provide you some of those B vitamins that aren't where there's not really rich sources from other food.
Right.
Vitamin A, like an actual active form of vitamin A, because you can get vitamin A from plants, but we can't convert that to, genetics largely determine whether or not you can convert that into an active form that your immune system and your body can use. So, unless you're really intentional about your nutrition and really like getting all of the vitamins in their active forms and nutrients in their active forms, I think it's just a super simple thing just to put a multivitamin in, a high quality multivitamin, not something you're getting from your grocery store. If it's in your grocery store, even most of the stuff at Whole Foods and Sprouts and those type of things, if it's in a regular grocery store, it is not something you should be taking. And I get this question a lot. Like people say, my doctor told me that multivitamins are worthless. Well, that was based on like observational data where they looked at, hundreds of thousands of people and who took multivitamins versus who didn't.
Yeah, they surveyed them. There wasn't a double-blind study on a particular pharmaceutical grade multivitamin.
Exactly. In the survey, these people are taking Centrum, which is just, don't take one if you're going to take
Yeah,
Centrum.
stop that. There's a reason you throw it up if you didn't eat food.
Yeah, it's not going to do. So, and that factors into the energy balance equation. Like there's studies that have shown that if you're deficient in vitamin D, don't supplement the other group and they will lose more weight. The vitamin D, the one that gets the supplement, because they reached sufficiency. They reached a blood level where they're functioning optimally. And it's just another factor that's impossible really to consider.
Absolutely.
So that's where, it's an important tool for some people. And one of the areas, I think you mentioned it earlier, I think it offers flexibility. Like for some people, they just have things that they don't want to take out of their diet. Like I want to eat ice cream. And a lot of dads drink a beer or two at night. And there's nothing wrong with that from a health perspective. There's actually potentially some benefit from most of the studies that have been published. So I'm like, okay, a beer is 200 calories, 150 to 200 calories. Don't eat rice or pasta that meal at night, and you'll still be on the right trajectory. And that's where I feel like, counting calories can be helpful, is that it helps you identify substitutions that will make the lifestyle more sustainable. But beyond that, I don't think that it should be the foundation of a program.
I love that.
Once you see, okay, that ice cream, well, man, and sometimes you'll, okay, I like that, but that really is not a good decision. Like I know I need to cut that out because I'm not going to be able to lose weight if I'm going to, snack on that. Go get a tablespoon of peanut butter. And it helps people make better decisions. Like, well, a tablespoon of peanut butter or 3 cups of, strawberries. Like some people, you get to weigh those options, and just really understanding calorie content of your foods can be helpful for making informed decisions.
Yeah, well said. I don't even want to try to add to that. That was very well said. I appreciate that perspective, because as you know, I speak with a lot of coaches on not only this show, but also in my practice and in real life regularly. And, kind of that coach who's been in the business for maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 years, especially if they've been working solely on short-term body composition programs, you would think that counting calories was a religion. That's what you would think, like that nothing else matters. It's only calories, and that's the thing. And you can find research and stuff to support that intelligently. Like you have people who will swear by a particular diet fad, and we don't even have time right now. We have zero time. We like talking to each other, it seems like, but there's diet fads out there where it's like, oh, it doesn't even matter how many calories you eat if you just eat this way, like what? And the studies are pretty clear. You can't lose weight eating whatever you want in whatever amount you want if your caloric energy expenditure isn't taken into account. Whether you're keto or Atkins, or you cut out all meats and you only go vegan, or you cut out cut out all vegetables and eat only meat. That's a fun one. And but don't get me started right now. Maybe you and I should talk about that later. But when you compare all the diets across the long term from a weight management perspective, you lose weight because of the caloric deficit. Nobody disputes that. However, our conversation here makes me think of, and I talked about this recently as I was wrapping up the Beyond Calories series. If we compared our bodies to a car, for instance, where you feed it fuel and the engine does its job and everything's good, you bring up an important point with the micronutrients piece there, is that our body sure uses food as fuel, but the food supplies way more than that. Imagine if your fuel, when you put it into your car, if your car, as you were driving, was also building the engine, rebuilding the engine out of the fuel that you fed it, out of the nutrients and the DNA composition, and maybe, the fatty acids turned into better cells if they were from a better source. Like all of those things are a part of the car, not just the fuel. And so with the body, what I hear you saying, Dr. Chavez, is that when we consume our foods, so many factors go into whether or not that was a good decision for us on a daily basis. And when you're working with clients, the question is, how do I help you make the best decision for yourself? If calories are a helpful metric to help you choose, a different thing at dinner so that you can have your beer later without screwing everything else up, then awesome. But if what you and I need to focus on is vitamin D, then if we talk about calories a whole bunch, but we never get to the vitamin D issue, then we're going to get limited results. You're going to get frustrated and demotivated. And as a coach, I'm going to need to pull some other tools out of the tool belt because calories just aren't working well for you. And so that's what I'm hearing from you. I'd like you to be able to have the last word here as we come up on time. What would you like everybody to hear from you as I tried to summarize that?
Oh, I think you summarized it quite well. I mean, like you said, the calories, they're important. They're a tool. And if your goal is to be healthy, if your goal is to maintain a great body weight so that we can redefine the dad bod and, have more dads actually fit and in shape. Like I went to the water park 2 weekends ago, and I was the only person not significantly overweight because it was all dads. It's all dads there. And I was the only dad that wasn't significantly overweight. Like it wasn't like, I mean, and I do live in Texas, in San Antonio. So
I'm in Arkansas.
That's a factor too. Yeah. So that piece of it, it's a tool. And there's a lot of people saying, calories in, calories out. That's all that matters. That's all that matters. Get it down. If your goal long-term, if this is a journey that you're going to stick to forever, understand it. Spend some time on it, but also spend some time on food quality, spend some time on nutrient adequacy, spend some time on sleep, on training properly, on lifestyle and stress reduction. And all of these other factors are going to come together and help you maintain this long term. A lot of people see me and they're like, okay, you have a nutrition PhD, and they'll see what I eat sometimes. And they're like, how do you do that? Like you're in shape and you're healthy. And, it's building what works for me over time. I love food. If I go to a place that has delicious food that isn't quote unquote good for me, I'm going to eat it. And I'm probably going to eat a lot of it in some cases. I'm okay with that. That's what works for me. I know that what works for me is I do that, and then I adjust the next day and have a smoothie and a dinner, and I'm good. Like it all evens out. Find what works for you, but being rigid and getting stuck in one model and not building what works for you is never going to be sustainable. And that's, I think, Alex, I know your philosophy is, working with the clients and helping them, when you coach them, giving them these tools. And I think that's really, really important. I know you talk about it all the time, but build up your toolkit, use this as one piece in your toolkit. And if it works for you, and if counting calories is what works best for you, then that's fine. If intermittent fasting is what works best for you, that's fine. If keto is what works best for you, that's fine. Just be wise about it and develop it over time and figure out what, build that lifestyle that is going to be sustainable for the long term.
Awesome. Thanks for that, brother. And if you guys need help with that, Dr. Chavez has over 250 episodes of ridiculously good information to help you with your nutrition journey. And I'm not going to hit 250 soon. I'm a one a weeker. All right. But we're at 100. So we'll keep putting out good stuff to help you guys out. Dr. Chavez, thanks so much for joining us on Defining Dad Bod. I hope you have a kick butt rest of the week, and maybe we'll have you on sometime to poke some fun at some of the more dietary fads that are out there. Yeah.
Some of these fads. Yeah. I would love to. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate what you're doing. Have a good one, man.
You got it, brother. Thank you so much. And to everybody else, kick butt, steak names.
The free practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased thanks to the support of listeners just like you. For more information on how you can become a part of the inner circle of Defining Dad Bod, go to definingdadbod.com/inner circle.